Good, everybody? Take KZ back here with another wrestling review. I did a really long video yesterday that was kind of a nightmare to edit. So tried something different going live so I don't have to store a bunch of gigs on my computer. So there won't be any editing. Hopefully I don't sound too bad. I wanted to do an instant reactions to Forbidden Door that just ended here, probably about 30 minutes ago, maybe an hour ago. Talk about a little bit of Dragon Gate. Dragon Gate did a double header. I watched the early Dragon Gate show live, which was 9 p.m. my time, and did the late show. I started at the same time as the Forbidden Door pre-show. Um, so I don't have too many match ratings on there. Um, the only one I rated was the four-way from the early show where Jackie Kamei beat Flamita, Hamari, and Ishin. I gave that, let's see, where is that? I gave that 3.25. I thought it was pretty good, pretty short. Not as much noteworthy stuff from these shows as I expected. The heel army didn't name themselves. They did come out to Kikta's music instead of Zebrat's music because Zebrat is dead. But that's really the only notable thing that happened there. So Jackie Kamei won both his matches. Like I said he won the four-way on the early show, and then they had an 8-man tag against Paradox and Ultimo Dragon on the later show where Kamei scored the pinfall as well. I think it was on Kagetora. So that led to the following match after that was a D-Courage tag match, Roya Tanaka and Yuki Yoshioka taking on Vibes, KZ and Strong Machine J. I believe that was after intermission. Tanaka got the win with a cross saber. Like I said in my video yesterday, I was hoping he would use the cross saber as his finisher. It looks like he did. So hopefully that continues going forward. Kamei came out afterwards to confront him and challenge him to a Brave Gate match. So there's a Korakuen show early September. I think it's September 4th, where that match will take place. And then in our main event, we had a Triangle Gate match of Team Mexico, Bendito, Flamita, and Luis Monte. They took on the heel army, Ishin Kai and Yoshiki Kato. This match ended. Kato ripped off Flamita's mask. And then we had some run-ins. Hamari came in, cookie sheeted. Kato pulled Flamita on top, so Flamita scored the pin. But they weren't happy about winning unhonorably. So we're getting a rematch for that on that same September 4th Korakuen show. So just a rematch of these same 6 guys. We did get the Shun Skywalker return, surprise return. I don't speak Japanese, but Ishin and Ryo Saito were arguing. So presumably Ishin did an open challenge. Shun Skywalker's music hit. Him and Ishin closed the show out there with a quick 4-minute match. Nothing too noteworthy of matches on here. So like I said, this second show I watched with the Forbidden Door pre-show the whole time. It bled into the Copeland match. So I don't have ratings for any of this. I was distracted watching both at both times, so I don't feel like I can fairly rate anything. Nothing on the Forbidden Door pre-show or this Dragon Gate show really stood out to me as something I need to go back and watch. So I don't think there was anything 4-star offering here, but nothing seemed too bad. Kind of your run-of-the-mill Dragon Gate Road 2 shows, I would say. So let's move over to Forbidden Door. I'm going to pull up the card, even though I have my ratings, just so I can briefly talk about the pre-show matches. I probably can name them from memory. So we opened up with, what was the 8-man tag where we had the Crew and Josh Alexander and Hechisero taking on Yuya Uemura, El Desperado, and Papagon. Seemed fine. Didn't seem really all that great from what I could see. Just kind of warmed the crowd up as they're filing in kind of match. Then you had Ricochet and the Gates of Agony taking on Jet Speed and Michael Oku. Again, seemed fine to me. That Oku spot's all over Twitter. I missed that live between eating breakfast and having 2 shows going. This one seemed like if any of them were going to be like the top match on the pre-show, it seemed like it'd probably be this one. But I can't give you a star rating. 8-woman tag, Megan Bayne won, of course, because Megan Bayne usually wins. I was expecting the faces to win here. Harley Cameron's return match, Statlander teaming up with Willow finally, Queen Amanada and Willow. But that would mean Willow would win 3 matches in a row, and we can't have that. So the heels went over here. And then you had the trios title match where the Ops took on the War Dogs, all the British guys, and Clark Connors. It didn't seem that interesting to me from watching. It's got a 6 right now on Cage Match, so I think that's probably where I would have scored it had I scored it. And then the opening match was Copeland and Cage doing their reunion tour against the Matriarchy. This seemed really bizarre to me. Uh, I was finishing up the Triangle Gate match and the Shun match on this, so I don't have a rating. I don't think my rating would be very good. It's got a 3.25 on Cage Match. I probably would have went under 3 stars on this. I didn't understand what was going on with Killswitch and Kip Sabian. That just seemed very convoluted for no real reason. It seems like something they could have explored after this pay per view instead of doing it on the pay per view. But it seems like Nick Wayne's injury is maybe legit and they didn't know what they were doing here. That's certainly how it felt watching it without real audio. So in the first match I did actually watch was the TNT match, Kyle Fletcher and Hiromu Takahashi. I thought this was pretty good. I gave this 3.75 stars. Um, Hiromu really wanted to show out. I think Fletcher is on a pretty good roll right now. Um, in the Blue Moon Discord, we kind of argue about Fletcher a fair amount, and in other wrestling discords it comes up too, where he seems kind of inflated because he was feuding with Osprey and wrestling like the top guys. You wonder how good he actually is. Kind of had stinkers against Adam Cole. But the Dustin match was pretty good from Collision a few weeks ago. Hiromu showed out here. So I think Fletcher is really kind of spreading his wings a bit here. So like I said, 3.75. This is one of the better matches on the show. I thought overall this show was pretty weak until the top 2 matches. But we'll chug along here as we go. So next up, we had the TBS 4-way match. Mercedes Moné defeating Alex Windsor, Bozilla, and Persephone. I gave this 3.5, which is about what Cage Match is. Cage is 7.1. So more or less the same here. I thought this was fun. I don't really have anything negative to say about this. This was the first time I've watched Bozilla, and I feel like I got exactly what I've been told she is, where the size is impressive. She can do some impressive stuff. She fits a monster role, which not a lot of women really do, but she's very green. They almost were working 2 matches, was what I felt, which is why the rating's as low as it is for a match I thought was pretty good. I felt like they did a match where they did all the smoke and mirrors for Bozilla to make her look good and hide all her weaknesses, and then they would get her out of the ring, and the other 3 girls would wrestle, and that was like the second match, and they mixed it together pretty well. But I couldn't help but feel throughout that this was just 2 matches kind of stuck together. The next match I thought was by far the worst match, and it's really kind of a what style do you like? Zack Sabre Jr. defending against Nigel McGuinness. This is an 8.71 on Cage Match. I gave this 1.75. I thought this sucked. I thought this was really boring. I drank a Celsius like right around 9 a.m., so still in the pre-show, and I regretted it because I wish I had drank it during this match because I found this match to be utterly fucking boring. Nigel hit a couple good lariats. That's really the only positive things I can say about this. I'm done with Nigel. I hope this is the last time Nigel wrestles. It's fine. It's a feel-good story. I just am not interested in watching 50-year-olds on AEW. I'm not interested in watching nostalgia acts. That's what Nigel is ultimately, is a nostalgia act from like 2004. And I didn't watch Ring of Honor, so there's no nostalgia for me. And without the nostalgia, I just don't get really what the appeal of Nigel is. He's fine, but AEW's not where fine people wrestle. It's supposed to be where the best wrestle. So I just don't like the idea of 50-year-old Nigel going out there and working like 3-star matches at best. And I think he couldn't really keep up with Sabre. With this being in England, they wanted to work that very British style, which obviously some people will like. case in point with this being 8 on cage match. Not a style for me. Just found it painfully boring. Couldn't wait for it to be over. I started singing to keep myself awake, um, talking shit in discords and stuff. Just anything to avoid watching the match because I didn't want to fall asleep. Next up, you had the three-way AEW tag title match that was announced as elimination. Me and Jake went back and forth in Discord. Jake was giving me shit for predicting or projecting problems with AEW that weren't real, and I was giving him shit back today because I was like, I think they're going to revoke this stipulation. I think they put that stipulation on there by mistake because it's not on the graphic. And lo and behold, this wasn't an elimination match. It was single fall, and it didn't feel like anyone knew what the fucking rules were because they started off as like a tornado fight, and the announcers are like, "Oh, this is a tornado match," and then everyone ended up standing on the apron and doing tags, and they were like, "Well, it's actually not tornado; it's no DQ because it's a three-way, but they're still tags." Which, yeah, Brian even like shit on a little bit on commentary, where he was like, "Well, if there's no disqualification, why are they tagging? There's no punishment for not tagging." So, bit of a cluster there, and it was a cluster for the reason all of us knew is because Bobby Lashley refuses to take a fucking pin. So we had a needless kind of run out, which I guess is kind of tight, cutely trying to tie together the MGF story, which they had to just drop because Bobby refuses to take a pin. So they had Ricochet and Gates of Agony, who attacked Mark Briscoe on Dynamite this week, uh, on on behalf of MJF, came out and attacked the Hurt Syndicate. Uh, some people think they're teasing they're going to feud. I think this is just a write off. I think it was to try to make it seem like we didn't waste 4 months of TV on these guys, but that's clearly what happened. So Bobby Lashley goes out, never taking the pin, never working a real legitimate tag team. Yes, you had FTR in this match, an all-in match, but they were both three ways because they didn't want to put them over because they didn't want to put anyone over. I think they kind of stumbled into something nice here with Bandito, and Brody King, especially because, as we'll get to here in the next couple of matches, they wrote off Swerve and Osprey. Those guys will both be out for a little while. So you go from like overnight having a lot of strong top face level presence to now the faces kind of feel lacking. So I think Brody King and Bandito being belted up here will be good for the company because I think they kind of need those faces elevated. I thought this match was actually pretty good. This was the best Hurt Syndicate match of their run. They actually tried. They actually showed a little ass, which was nice. I gave this 3.25 stars. So still just good, but I think most of their stuff has sucked. Um, and this was good. This was fun. Um, Bullshit aside, but anyone that follows wrestling news online knew bullshit was coming because Bobby ain't going to take that pin. And Bobby's never going to take that pin. And hopefully we never see them on AEW TV again. Next up, we had the AEW Unified match. Okada defeating Swerve. Cage Match says this was 16 minutes, 7.3, which is pretty in line with me. I gave it 3.5. I thought this was pretty good. I thought it was obvious that Swerve leaked the torn meniscus because that was a very big story point of this match, which allowed them to kind of work slow and kind of sell the gimmick, work the leg and stuff, kind of protect Swerve in a way. I thought this was the second best match of the card up to this point, and until the two main events was the second best match, which is a reflection of how poor this card was because this was firmly a 3.5 star match. Not a whole lot to say on this. It was fine. It didn't keep my interest throughout. So, like Alex in the Discord gave it a 4. I think if I had paid attention the whole time, it was a 4. But the way I kind of view wrestling is if it doesn't keep my attention, that should reflect in the match rating as well. I shouldn't have to lock in and like drink coffee to sit through every second of a match. So 3.5 on this. They did the angle afterwards to write off Swerve. Okada beat his knee up in the stairs, and then Wardlow came back, which is not inspiring. I forgot to talk about they randomly had Amanada and Thekla brawl after the Nigel match to set up Jamie Hayter's return. So that is nice. Jamie's back, which will give the women a push kind of makes the pre-show match with Willow and Stat and Harley and all them losing make a little more sense because they'll get a little more juice on that face side for the inevitable women blood and guts match with Jamie in there, um, which kind of makes the face side overpowered. But they're really trying to push Megan Bayne as a monster, which is working for some people. Doesn't work for me at all, but that is what it is. So yeah, Wardlow came back, didn't even necessarily look in shape. Did a couple of his moves to Swerve, joined the Don Callis family. They did give, they had the whole family come out to congratulate Jake Hams with Wardlow. Takeshita got his own entrance, which feels like they're teasing the face turn, which again, going back to Swerve and Ospreay getting written off, I think will be good. I think it's kind of the perfect timing, um, by coincidence, for Takeshita to make this face turn. I think this was happening no matter what, but now he can potentially become like the number two face in the company right behind Hangman. So it might be a good blessing here to turn Takeshita face, get him rolling there. Um, he's kind of doing like a tweener thing in New Japan where it feels like he should just be a face. They don't seem like they know what they want to do with him because of the AEW politics of him being a heel. So I think turning him face, headlining the Dome, if they do ultimately headline him in the Dome, which I don't know how you don't at this point, potentially beating Okada for the first Okada pin besides Bryan in the C2 to win that belt. And then you got the top two guys, Hangman and Takeshita with the top two belts. I think it would be pretty cool. I think we're heading that way, which is exciting. Next up, we had the two world title matches. First up is the women, Toni Storm and Athena, 7.2 on Cage Match. I went 3.5, so pretty aligned there once again. This was fine. Toni Storm was in Mary Antoinette. I probably shouldn't have spoiled that. I don't really know that person. I recognize the name, and people in Discord are telling the story. I don't really know that French history, but it looked like she came out in whiteface, but she was playing a historical European character. Cool. Athena looked pretty good. This match was just kind of fine though. 3.5. Nothing bad, but it just didn't reach a higher level. Tony got Athena to tap out clean, which is kind of weird because Athena is wrestling Mina Shirakawa on the ROH pay-per-view next week. I didn't think Athena was going to win this match, but having her tap out in the middle of the ring after some shenanigans from Billy Starks and stuff helping her, that was odd. They booked Tony Storm really strong, which I go back and forth on. I get why they do it. She's their top woman. There's nothing wrong with that, but I also think it hurts the depth a bit because it feels like everyone is beneath her, even though she takes so many pinfall losses. So we're in kind of a weird spot with Tony where I think there's clearly no plan for her to drop the belt, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but um, she's a four-time women's champion. It just feels like since she's joined the company, every women's title match involves her, which is getting a little stale for me. But overall, the fan base clearly isn't feeling stale with Tony Storm. So it's going to continue for the time being here. The semi-main, your main event before the unsanctioned match, so to speak, was Hangman Page defending against MJF. Cage match says this went 30 minutes, which is crazy. I didn't think it felt that long, even though it did feel long. I would have guessed it was probably about 20. 31 is pretty high. Cage match went 8.27. I went 4. Again, pretty much right in line there. Surprisingly, not a lot of bullshit in the beginning. MJF did his standard kind of heel, not engaging bullshit at the beginning, which is probably why this is 31 minutes because it probably took like 5 minutes to actually start, which adds nothing. I don't really get the gimmick of that, but I guess it gets heat. So that was fine. They worked a pretty good match where there wasn't a whole lot of the bullshit of trying to get Hangman DQ'd till we got to the later end of the match. And then you got all the bullshit. So the thing that didn't work at all was Hangman hit Bryce. I think MJF pulled Bryce into something or shoved Bryce into Hangman, kicked him in the dick, did the heat seeker, pinned him. Hangman got his foot on the rope. Bryce counted a 3. but didn't see it and just like passed out after counting the three. They had Briscoe's music hit. He walked out and beat up security guards. Never made it to the ring, so they brought him back out, and it distracted Hangman, or it distracted MJF enough for when Hangman went to go remove Page's foot from the rope. Bryce miraculously woke up and saw it and said, "Hey, this match is still going." It was fucking corny. It was bad. There just had to be a better way to shoehorn Mark Briscoe in than this. Um, a lot of people in the Discord are saying they should have counted the three, ring the bell, had Briscoe come out and argue with Bryce and get him to overturn it. I think that would have worked a lot more because the distraction to MJF didn't really add anything. And so Hangman's foot just sat on the rope for 2 minutes, and then Bryce saw it and went, "Oh, he must have surely had it on the count, even though 120 seconds had passed since I counted the three." So that was bad. And then you got all the bullshit after that. Um, he maybe pulled out the ring before that, I don't know. But you had the ring gimmick, and then you had dick kicks, and then you had hitting people with the contract. Um, but they just sold it well. Hangman fucking clocked him with that clipboard. So as annoying as it is that they're doing the clipboard bullshit, the spots were good. So still a 4 star. Begrudgingly 4 star. I didn't want to give it 4 stars because of all the bullshit and nonsense, but they did it well. And if you do it well, it's well done. Ultimately, feels kind of like an oxymoron to say that, but it's the reality of it. And then the main event, we had the lights out cage match. It was War Dogs cage match style, which I figured because you can't get 10 guys in one ring with a cage surrounding the ring. That's just too much, especially with these guys all beaten up as much as they are. They had to be able to lay around on the outside for minutes at a time. So we got the War Dogs cage. Um, Face team Darby Allin, Golden Lovers, Tanahashi and Osprey, and then they took on the Death Riders, Gabe Kidd and the Bucks. It's fucking crazy, man. This was 32 minutes, and despite having a lot of hobbled guys in there, it never really lulled. They paced it perfectly, I think, where um, there were high spots, but there weren't really the lulls of like two guys laying in the ring for 30 seconds. You kind of had a spot, throw a guy outside, another guy comes in, do the spot. So yeah, a bunch of crazy shit. At one point, the Bucks power bomb Darby onto a ladder, and he hits the ladder weird, and it splits his ear open. So he's just bleeding profusely out of the side of his head, which was crazy. But you didn't see it too much. But when he got power bombed, he immediately grabbed the side of his head and was checking, so you knew something kind of went wrong there. But they made sure to sell it because then 5-10 minutes later, they had Claudio duct tape him to a steel chair. Moxley pull out a fork and just jab that fork in his ear, just in the ear meat, working the ear. You could see the fork moving the ear. It was nasty. It was disgusting. Um, really visceral, good shit there. Tanahashi looked rough in this match, which you kind of knew he would, but he went out there and gave it his all as the final match in the UK. I thought Kota Ibushi and Kenny looked much better than I expected them to. They were out there doing their shit, hitting their signature spots, taking some pretty decent bumps. Same with Osprey. I think we know after watching that match, Osprey doesn't have like a fractured neck or anything. He's definitely banged up, definitely taking time off, but he could do all his stuff. And they paced it out where, he was doing his spots, but he wasn't working Osprey pace. He would come in, hit, his crazy moonsaults or the fucking hidden blades and that kind of shit. But then he would get taken out and lay on the outside for 5 minutes. So he didn't really have to put himself in jeopardy of where he's cutting and doing 7 movements in 3 seconds and shit. He would just do spot, lay down, spot, lay down. So that worked really well. Bucks were great. Obviously, Bucks are always kind of carrying these kind of matches. No exception here. They were the work rate kings here. I don't remember a lot of Gabe Kidd spots. He had a couple face-to-faces with Kenny. I don't really remember anything that happened there. Gabe had the dive off the top with Darby through all the tables at the end, which I was kind of surprised. I thought he would just throw Darby, but they both got taken out. I missed how Moxley ended up outside of the cage, but you end up with a couple guys outside the cage, which leads to the finish where all the faces hit Matt Jackson with their finishers, basically. Tanahashi hits the high fly flow to get the pin at the end. Um, which was just kind of the nail in the coffin. He had already eaten a 1 week angel um, hidden blade combination, so he was down for the 100 count before the high fly flow. But Tanahashi got to score the win as the ace here, which was a nice little touch, I thought. And then you get the closing angle where Osprey gets taken out and gets his neck broken by the Death Rider. So Osprey probably be out for the next couple months at least. I don't think he'll be out for a significant amount of time. I would say probably Revolution at the soonest. Gave this 4.5. So those last two matches really saved this pay per view. This pay per view is probably like a sub 7 before that. I think you probably got to give it like a 7, 7.5 after those top two matches because they were both great. Cage match, legitimately great stuff. Potential top 10 match of the year for me. MJF Hangman, great. Only a 4-star, so not going to make like an honorable mention or anything, but very solid. Um, and everything kind of played out how I thought it would on this pay per view, other than Brodito winning. I was just being pessimistic about that, but I think that's the right decision. That's what the fans wanted, and I think with the way everything is kind of shaped out, I think Brodito having those belts means a lot more. You can't just vanity put them on Cope and Christian right now. So I think that was good. Um, so a big thing coming out of this was MJF reneged on cashing in the contract. So he still has the contract. And WWE is doing that counter programming show for the first time with a WWE PLE for All Out. And the thing is, MJF is working the CMLL anniversary show title versus Mask with Mystico in the main event, which just happens to be the night before All Out. So he's going to be in Mexico City on Friday the 19th. So it's hard for me to fathom he's going to have a match booked on All Out on 7/20. And with WWE, they're going to roll out all the PR. They've announced all their stars are going to be on that match, on that show ahead of time, which is very interesting because they basically said, without announcing the matches, they basically said Cena versus Brock is going to happen there. Punk is going to wrestle. Seth Rollins is going to wrestle. Cody Rhodes is going to wrestle. And McIntyre is going to wrestle. So that makes you think, and Becky. So that makes you think that they're going to do Brock Cena, they're going to do Punk Rollins, and they're going to do Cody McIntyre, which are three pretty big matches. It's going to be on that weird ESPN app that seems like they've totally fucking mangled the rollout of. So how many people are actually going to be able to watch it will be fascinating to find out. And it's going to cost people pretty much $30 across the board. Some people get it with their cable, but it seems very kind of hit or miss or who gets it and very convoluted on signing up for it. So I think it's going to be a thing where a lot of people think they're ready for it and they're going to log onto the app, but they don't have the right subscription for it because there's all these tiers and then there's like the Disney bundle. So I think ESPN has 3 tiers. ESPN Plus is now the lowest tier, which doesn't include WWE. Um, and then the Disney bundles that are like have everything Disney, Hulu, ESPN Plus. They're staying at the lower tier. So I think a lot of people that think they have ESPN Plus or ESPN cable because it doesn't include Comcast, it doesn't include YouTube TV, it doesn't include a couple things. So I think a lot of people are gonna have 720 or 920 roll around, try to turn on that WWE PLE and not have it, and they're gonna have to go through the hassle of signing up and spending $30 when they're not expecting to spend $30. So I don't think it's gonna hurt All Out, but I think with it being on ESPN, they're gonna really kind of flood the news center of everything on Twitter and the social media sphere and everything. So I'm worried that with all those circumstances, MJF's gonna cash in on Hangman. So AEW has their little snippet of the news cycle where even when Fightful and all these people are trying to do their WrestlePalooza reviews, they have to mention All Out because the cash in happened. You can't just ignore that it happened. You can't just pretend like Brock and Cena is the only thing that matters, and the Edge and Christian versus FTR match in Toronto doesn't matter. So I'm scared they're going to do that. I don't think it's a bad thing because when you look at the AEW roster, there's not a lot of top heels. So there's not a lot of places for Hangman to go. So I think if Hangman is going to be world champ at All In next August, I don't think there's enough heels for him to get there. So I think taking a detour where MJF holds the belt, so you do something like Hangman and Ricochet at All Out, MJF cashes in, then you do MJF Briscoe at Wrestle Dream, then you do Hangman MJF again at Full Gear, put the belt on Hangman there. So then you're buying yourself 3 pay-per-view cycle, where you're not running through everyone. And then maybe you get Swerve back, maybe you get Osprey back, maybe Fletcher's ready for a main event at that point. Maybe you can heat up like a Joe or something like that. If Daniel Garcia turns, I don't think Garcia can really be in the main event, but you go through the names. The other name you could potentially do for All Out, especially if you're trying to do the news cycle, is you could do Kenny there. So you could do something on like a Dynamite where you have Omega, Moxley, Joe, and MJF as your 4 healthy former world champions. Do a mini tournament or like a 4-way elimination that Kenny ultimately wins, because Kenny doesn't have enough wins where I think you can just give him the title shot. Although it's not like AEW hasn't done that in the past. They just gave Nigel a IWGP title shot, having not won a match for 11 years or 14 years or whatever the fuck it was. So it's not that you can't give Kenny the match, but I think you could do something cool like a 4-way elimination and have Darby run out or Briscoe run out. You can protect Moxley and MJF. You don't need to protect Joe, but you can do something where you protect those guys, or you just do single fall and just have Kenny pin Joe, which would be an awesome Dynamite main event. And then you have a big time draw, Hangman Omega and All Out, because I think you need a main event for that. I don't know that you can main event with like Hangman Ricochet. And I don't think you can main event with Copeland Christian versus FTR for not for the belts. And even if it were for the belts, um, Copeland's on all the promotional shit, but I just think that's a bad idea. I don't think you're selling pay-per-views with a tag team match, nostalgia tag team match, especially for All Out, which is one of your flagship shows. I think that's a mistake. So you need a big Hangman match. Hangman Omega would cover that there, and then you can do like a grudge Hangman Ricochet on that Wrestle Dream undercard with MJF Briscoe. Um, I think that would work. You have the Don Callis family super strong right now, so they can work with Bandito. I wouldn't hate pairing up Bandito and Brody with like Hangman and that kind of being your face trio. Although if they're feuding with MJF and Gates of Agony and Ricochet, I guess that still works. You can do a pay-per-view cycle of Gates of Agony versus Brodito, and then you kind of move over to the Don Callis family after that. Takeshita is set up pretty good, I think, with Don Callis family. I think ultimately you turn him, you get the Okada match at World's End and the C2 final. But you can do all this stuff. You can wrestle Wardlow, as shitty as wrestling Wardlow is, Alexander Hechicero. There's a lot of interesting stuff for Takeshita to do there. Not sure how they're going to thread that needle, but I think they kind of have to. So that'll be pretty fun to see. You basically have all the women healthy right now. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with Monet and Tony Storm, with everyone else kind of being caught up in the blood and guts build. Now you got Hayter. So Hayter and Harley maybe just shift Ty J out of that altogether, and you do Amanada, Statlander, Willow, Hayter, Harley versus the Triangle of Sadness, Penelope and Megan Bain. I can't get excited for that because I just think the heel side is so weak. I'm not big on Thekla and Megan Bain, and they have to carry that on the heel side. But I was a little hesitant on the lights out cage match tonight. And even with all those banged up guys, obviously the workers and the star power is much higher. But with guys banged up and having to protect themselves, I wasn't sure that match could hit that 4.5 stars. So the women in the plunder probably could pull it off, especially with the star power on the faces side. Yeah, I kind of thought I would have a little bit more predictions, but I really just have that cash out prediction for All Out. So I'm going to call it there because I feel like I'm just rambling. Thanks, guys. I hope you check it out. Have a good one.